You're not going to believe this. Carlos Alcaraz didn't just beat Arthur Fils in the Qatar Open final, he absolutely obliterated him. Fils was so frustrated he smashed his racket to pieces, then actually had to apologize to the crowd for not giving them a real fight. The trophy ceremony kicks off, and just when everyone expects Alcaraz to brag about his perfect performance, his 12-0 record, or his dominance, he turns to Fils and drops 7 words that silenced the entire arena. It wasn't about the match, and it certainly wasn't about his own greatness. This was a moment of pure empathy from a guy who knows exactly what hell Fils has been living through. What happened next proved that you can be a ruthless champion and a class act at the same time, something we rarely see in pro sports. Stick around until the end to hear exactly what Alcaraz said. Context is everything here, because Alcaraz had just played what the analytics guys are calling the single best match of his career, a performance rating of 9.68. That is the highest score recorded since they started tracking this data in 2024. Check the stats. 82% first serves, 89% won on first serve, 5 aces, 0 double faults, and only 8 unforced errors in a championship final. That is unheard of. He destroyed an opponent who walked onto that court with genuine belief, dangerous weapons, and nothing to lose. Arthur Fils isn't some random lucky qualifier. The guy is top 40 in the world. He's beaten giants. He has a legitimate game. And yet, Alcaraz made him look like a complete amateur in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom episode. Usually, that kind of domination comes with a massive ego, swagger, and a total focus on your own excellence. It's human nature. When you play the match of your life in a final, you want to bask in the glory, talk about your stats, and make the moment all about you. But that is not what Alcaraz did. And that choice reveals something fundamental about who he is as a man, not just a tennis player. Arthur, it's a pleasure to share the court with you, man. During the ceremony, Alcaraz said, "I told you that more than results and everything for me, it makes me really happy seeing you on the court once again." That opening line, "more than results," is critical, because, in pro sports, results are supposed to be the only thing that matters. Winning is the point, titles are the goal, money, rankings, and legacy are all built on the scoreboard. That is the entire structure of competitive athletics, but Alcaraz is explicitly saying there is something more important than the win, and that something is seeing a fellow competitor back in the arena after an injury. That is a radically different value system than the cutthroat mentality that usually rules the tour. It is worth asking why that matters. Then came the part that showed Alcaraz truly understands Phil's struggle. "I know you struggled physically. You struggled with injuries. I've been through that." This wasn't just empty sympathy. This was recognition born from shared pain, because Alcaraz has battled serious injuries too. He missed the 2023 Australian Open with a hamstring tear. He's had abdominal issues. He's dealt with ankle problems. He knows the feeling when your body betrays you. When the training has to stop, he knows the misery of sitting at home, watching tournaments you should be playing in, wondering if you'll ever get back to your peak. That shared nightmare creates real empathy. It's not the generic "sorry you got hurt" that anyone can offer. It's "I know exactly how that feels because I've lived it." That hits different. It means something to survive that darkness and return to playing finals. It makes me really happy to share the court, locker room, and tournament with you. Pay attention to the psychological move Alcaraz is making here. He isn't praising Fils for the match they just played, frankly. Fils didn't play well enough to touch him, but for the grind to get here after 8 months off. He's honoring him for reaching a final in only his 3rd tournament back, for having the mental toughness to return to competition after a serious injury. That is elite emotional intelligence because Alcaraz knows Fils is probably feeling worthless in that moment. He just lost a final in 50 minutes. He smashed his racket in frustration. He apologized to the crowd. His confidence is likely shattered. Everything hurts. He's hurting physically from the match, emotionally from the loss, and mentally from the disappointment. And in that vulnerable moment, Alcaraz steps in to remind him of what he actually achieved this week. Not the loss, but the comeback. Not the final score, but the journey. That is intentional support from a champion who understands how fragile an athlete's psyche can be after a crushing defeat. Great job with your team and family as well. Keep going. For sure, we're going to share great moments. That final sentence is crucial because it looks forward. It doesn't just acknowledge the past struggle or the current pain. It's a promise of future battles. It's Alcaraz telling him, "You belong at this level, and I'll see you in the next big match." Now, that is the definition of pure class. It elevates Fils from a conquered victim to a worthy adversary, mere moments after wiping the floor with him. The global tennis community absolutely lit up, showering the Spaniard with adoration for the gesture. Spectators were spellbound, falling even harder for a champion who can sever heads during the match and then offer a warm embrace once the final point is played. Finding that perfect blend of killer instinct and genuine heart is like discovering a diamond in the rough. But this gesture peels back the curtain on how Alcaraz views the very nature of the game. For most players, the guy on the other side of the net is just a hurdle to be cleared, a villain in the story. You usually pray for their downfall because their stumble is your stride. But Carlos operates on a completely different frequency. Make no mistake, he is out for blood when the clock is ticking, and he showed zero mercy during that beatdown. Yet, once the dust settles, he is genuinely stoked to see Arthur back on his feet and swinging freely. He doesn't view him as a nemesis, but as a brother in arms navigating the brutal circuit, enriching the game just by being there. He understands that another man's shine doesn't dull his own sparkle, a level of wisdom that usually takes decades to cultivate. Most 22-year-olds sitting on 26 career titles aren't losing sleep over their rivals' medical charts. They are too busy polishing their egos, obsessing over rankings, and plotting their next conquest. That Alcaraz pivoted immediately to honor Phil's recovery speaks volumes about the man behind the racket. It hits close to home, too. Carlos explicitly mentioned, "I've been there," recalling his own dark days of rehab. He looks at Arthur and sees a mirror image of his own struggles, recognizing the shared pain of a young body breaking down. Instead of guarding his throne, he extends a hand of empathy, and that is the very definition of leadership. Not the loud, chest-beating bravado, but the quiet strength that uses the spotlight to elevate everyone in the room. It is understanding that your voice has power and choosing to wield it to heal rather than to harm. Arthur Phil's reaction during the trophy ceremony told its own story. The kid looked absolutely crushed. "I'm at a loss for words," he admitted, thanking the audience before apologizing profusely for the match's quality. "I know it was a sprint, not a marathon," he mumbled. He basically asked forgiveness for the quick knockout, feeling like he cheated the ticket holders out of a proper show. You could see the self-blame eating him alive, but his demeanor flipped the moment he turned to face Alcaraz. "You played like a machine, man. It's a joke. Hats off to you and your squad. Hope you keep this rolling. What you're doing is unreal." That specific choice of words, "it's a joke," is fascinating. It is a confession that Carlos was operating in the stratosphere, playing a game that felt utterly impossible to counter. He wasn't looking for a cop-out, he was simply stating the brutal truth. And when Phils playfully called him a bastard for being that good, it highlighted the deep bond surviving the heat of battle. You don't drop a line like that unless there is a foundation of profound mutual admiration. We have to look at the big picture here, because the tennis circuit can be the loneliest place on earth. You are living out of suitcases, miles from home, and your only company is the guy trying to take your job. You see the same faces daily, yet you're plotting their destruction, creating a strange social dance where you're cordial but guarded. Co-workers who are technically trying to fire you every single week. Alcaraz is trying to smash that wall, reminding everyone that there are beating hearts beneath the branded athletic gear. He's essentially saying, "We battle like warriors, but we bleed the same, and I see your scars." If the heavy hitters start adopting this mindset, the entire vibe of the tour could shift permanently. Historically, this game has been fueled by feuds that looked more like war than sport. McEnroe and Lendl looked like they wanted to settle things in a back alley, and the friction with Connors was palpable. Even the modern titans Federer, Djokovic, Nadal had moments where the air between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. But this new generation, spearheaded by Alcaraz and potential rivals like Phil's, is rewriting the script entirely. They are proving you can be savage competitors and decent human beings simultaneously, setting a gold standard for the next wave of talent. And focusing on the injury aspect is crucial, because that is the grim reaper of careers in this sport. Talent means absolutely nothing if your body decides to quit on you. But the wreckage left by an injury isn't just about torn ligaments or missing practice sessions. It is the haunting dread that your best days are history, forcing you to watch from the sidelines as rivals eclipse you. It is the terrifying mystery of whether your body will ever listen to you again, and the slow-motion death of your self-belief during those long months away. For those without a massive safety net, it brings financial panic and the crushing mental weight of having to rebuild a career from ground zero. Carlos Alcaraz doesn't just know this intellectually. He has walked through that fire, so when he looks at Arthur Phils and says, "I've been there," he isn't just filling silence. He is broadcasting a deep, resonant signal. "I understand the hell you just crawled out of. I recognize the wars you fought just to stand on this court today, and I honor that battle." That kind of endorsement is oxygen to an athlete on the mend, mostly because our brains love to trick us into diminishing our own pain, convincing us that others have it worse, or that we have no right to gripe because we are lucky enough to hold a racket for a living. But when that stamp of approval comes from a titan like Alcaraz, a man sitting on the absolute throne of the sport, it silences those inner demons and confirms that surviving the ordeal was a victory in itself. The specific moment Alcaraz chose to say, "This was surgical." He didn't let the clock run out. He didn't slide into the DMs later or whisper it while they were grabbing towels in the locker room. He grabbed the mic at the trophy presentation, standing before a stadium of thousands and a global broadcast audience of millions. That choice amplifies the weight of his words, transforming a private pep talk into a public coronation of grit. By turning the spotlight on Fils right then and there, Alcaraz literally rewrote the headlines for the Doha tournament. The story stops being about a guy who got crushed in 50 minutes and starts being about a warrior returning from the abyss to reach a final against the odds. It steers the conversation away from the bitterness of the loss and anchors it on the triumph of the journey, which is a massive psychological gift. That is how you weaponize your fame to lift someone else up. And the beauty is, it didn't cost Carlos a single dime. Actually, it polished his own crown, making him look like a wise elder statesman rather than just a cold-blooded winning machine. But don't get it twisted. There is a smart, selfish streak here too, because the game is infinitely better when sharks are circling each other in deep waters. Carlos needs monsters to hunt to keep his own blade sharp, and if Fils evolves into one of those monsters, the whole sport wins. So by breathing confidence into his opponent and spotlighting his return, Alcaraz is practically gardening, watering the seeds of a future nemesis who will force him to level up. That is four-dimensional chess, thinking about legacy and evolution instead of just trying to kill off the competition while they are weak. The way the press reacted was a lesson in itself, considering sports news usually obsesses over the scoreboard. It is usually all about the winner, the margin of victory, the cold, hard statistics, and the ranking points. The actual beating heart of the athlete usually gets buried under a mountain of data and hot takes. Yet, Carlos's speech became the headline specifically because it stripped away the numbers and showed the soul. It forced the world to remember that we aren't watching video game characters, but flesh and blood humans with real scars. The audience devoured it, demanding more deep dives into the meaning of that handshake, the backstory of the injury, and the class act of the champion. This proves people are starving for narratives that go deeper than the box score, stories that showcase spirit, values, and who these guys are when the ball isn't in play. That tribute served up exactly that kind of depth, and the fans ate it up. Now, all eyes turn to how this bond between the Spaniard and the Frenchman evolves. Because if Arthur keeps climbing and he definitely has the raw firepower and now the battle scars of surviving a major final, these two are going to be crashing into each other on Sundays a lot more often. Every future clash will have the ghost of that Doha speech hovering over the net. Will it light a fire under Fils to finally topple the king? Will he take that grace and burn it as fuel to prove he is not just a charity case, but a peer? Or will that foundation of respect turn their rivalry into something ferocious yet brotherly, where they try to destroy each other on court but hug it out afterwards? Honestly, that is the holy grail of sports rivalries. We don't need more blood feuds. We need titans who force each other to evolve, while acknowledging they are cut from the same cloth. Look at how the Federer and Nadal saga turned out a war zone on the court, but pure admiration once the rackets were packed away. Carlos and Arthur have the rare chance to construct that kind of legendary dynamic right from Chapter 1. But the real takeaway here is bigger than just two tennis players. It is about the choice every winner faces the moment they hold the trophy. Winners have choices. They can bask in their own glory, brush off the loser, and soak up the applause. Or they can show some class. They can spotlight the person standing on the other side of the net. Alcaraz took the high road. By doing that, he proved a massive point. You don't have to pick a side between being a shark and being a decent human being. You don't have to choose between the hunger for gold and treating your rival with basic dignity. You can chase the trophy without losing your soul. Go ahead, be a beast. Crush them in 50 minutes. Smash 23 winners. Leave them grasping for air, and still be a gentleman when the dust settles. You can still nod to the hell they went through to get there. You can champion their comeback. You can view them as flesh and blood worthy of respect, not just a speed bump you flattened on the way to a paycheck. That is the divide between the skilled and the legendary. Good players hoist trophies. Legends elevate the whole game. They drag the entire sport upward just by how they carry themselves. Carlos Alcaraz, at only 22 years old, is already wearing those shoes. It isn't just his tennis, which is terrifyingly good. It is his manners, his humility, and how he wields the microphone. He walks the tightrope between the savage drive needed to rule and the kindness needed to be a leader worth following. Arthur Fils is just 21. He has a lifetime of matches ahead, but he will carry this memory, this final, this loss, and Carlos's words, forever. Not because the match was short, but because the #1 player on earth treated him like an equal. It brings me genuine joy to see you back on this court. Hearing that from the guy who just dismantled you, from the king of the hill, that hits different. It grounds you. It offers a lifeline of hope, proving that the sweat was worth it and the horizon is bright. Fast forward a few years when Fils is hoisting his own Grand Slam trophy, his mind might drift back to this night in Doha. He will recall exactly what Alcaraz said, and he might just pay it forward to some injured rookie who desperately needs to know they haven't been forgotten. That is how you shift the vibe of a sport. Not with rulebooks, but with quiet, human moments that ripple out. Through icons who decide to pull others up the ladder with them. Through acts of real empathy that scream, "We are people before we are competitors." The gap between Alcaraz the Destroyer and Alcaraz the Gentleman teaches a masterclass in psychology. We have this silly myth in sports that kindness equals weakness, that if you like your opponent, you can't rip their heart out. Carlos proves that is total nonsense. You can absolutely annihilate someone for 50 solid minutes, give them zero oxygen, no hope, and then hug it out the second the umpire calls time. Those vibes don't clash. They actually feed each other. The greats understand that instinctively. Respect isn't pity. Respect is playing your absolute hardest because that is what they deserve. It means going to war between the lines, then offering peace at the net. That is actually way harder than being a full-time jerk or a full-time saint. It takes serious emotional maturity to flip that switch. To be an assassin with the racket and a friend without it, realizing the scoreboard doesn't define human worth. This moment also shines a light on the power of the podium in pro sports. Sure, it is easy for Alcaraz to be gracious. He is number one. The bank account is full. He is bulletproof. Praising a rival doesn't crack his armor or threaten his throne. Yet, he could easily hog the spotlight and make it the Carlos show. He could treat everyone else like extras in his highlight reel. Plenty of stars do exactly that, and we let them slide because, hey, winners take all, right? But Alcaraz flips the script. He uses the mic to build bridges, and that speaks volumes about his soul. No one forced him. It is just who he is. And that matters beyond the moment. The next generation of kids with rackets is watching and taking notes on what a real winner looks like. They are learning you can rule the world without losing your humanity. It proves you can conquer the world without losing your soul, that standing at the top doesn't mean sacrificing who you are. He is setting a standard, carving out a legacy that fundamentally shifts the atmosphere of the entire game. If the next wave of icons takes a page from his book, we are looking at a sport that values lifting each other up over solo glory. The reaction from the tennis world speaks volumes. Legends, pundits, and coaches didn't just applaud the sportsmanship, they were blown away by the depth. It wasn't your standard politeness. It was a display of raw, unfiltered empathy. Most pros just rattle off the usual robotic pleasantries. Nice hustle, bad break, you'll get 'em next time. Empty phrases tossed out without a second thought. But Carlos zeroed in on Phil's specific nightmare, the agony of the injury, and the grit it took to return. That attention to detail transformed a polite gesture into a profound connection. And look at where Phil is in his timeline. He is only 21. He steps onto the biggest stage of his life, and he gets absolutely dismantled. That is a crossroads moment. It either fuels your fire or shatters your spirit, all depending on the aftermath. If Carlos had been cold or dismissive, Phil could have easily spiraled into a dark place, thinking, "I don't belong here. I'm a fraud. Why bother?" But Carlos flipped the script entirely. "Look at the mountains you climbed to get here. The path matters. Don't stop." That is the narrative that turns a crushing loss into a stepping stone. Honestly, those words might have just saved Phil's future in the sport. That voice might be the only thing keeping him going during a brutal practice session next week. When the imposter syndrome hits before the next draw, when he questions if he can really hang with the Titans, he will recall that the king of the court, the very man who crushed him, sees his worth and honors his struggle. That is monumental. That shapes destinies. And honestly, Carlos probably has no clue how heavy his words actually were. He was just being real, speaking his truth right there on the clay. But that authenticity is the secret sauce. 50 minutes, 23 winners, total dominance followed by a sentiment that transcended the racket and touched the soul. This is the essence of why Carlos is truly one of a kind. This is why this day will stick in our memories. Forget the scoreboard. It is about the aftermath, not the annihilation, but the humanity.